Dear Katharina, we are very happy to welcome you again after you briefed our audience at the FELNET Monday briefings for first time in 2020. Last year, you gave an impressive and moving interview at ELNET's virtual gala that was still in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And we also had the honor to welcome you at our annual International Policy Conference just before the COVID pandemic started in 2019 in Paris. And I hope to welcome you again in May 2023 at our next policy conference in Paris that will take place again in person as part of our joint initiatives to help put the item of anti-Semitism on the top of Europe's priority list. The fact that the European Union has appointed you in 2015 as the first ever European Commission coordinator on combating anti-Semitism is a landmark decision, but also underlines the pressing necessity of your work following the very worrying developments we have been witnessing in the EU. Before being appointed as the European Commission coordinator on combating anti-Semitism, Katharina von Schnurbein worked for 5 years as an advisor to EU President José Manuel Barroso on the dialogue with religious and non-confessional organizations. Katharina started working for the European Commission in 2002 as a press officer for the EU delegation in Prague. And then she moved on to Brussels as the spokesperson for employment, social affairs, and equal opportunities. ELNET has come to know you as a true partner of the Jewish people in Europe who works around the clock to combat anti-Semitism wherever it occurs and helps building bridges between the European member states together with your colleagues and enhancing initiatives. Therefore, it's needless to say that we're really honored to have you here with us again, and ELNET is very much looking forward and very committed to continue working together closely also in the future. To start our conversation, David already mentioned it briefly, the denial more or less by the president of Iran about the Holocaust and other remarks in that context. Would you like to start by commenting on that before we go into the other topics of today?
Yes, Matthijs, it's a real pleasure to be with you, with ELNET again, also in this format, but I very much look forward to May next year in Paris and hope to see many of you also in person. I believe indeed it is important to react to what the Iranian president Ibrahim Raisi said, and to do so also on behalf of the European Union. We are really appalled by his comments and the interview he gave, in which he, as David said, quasi questioned that the Holocaust happened. Anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial is really incompatible, not just with European values, with universal values. And in fact, in Europe, Holocaust denial is criminalized across the EU based on European legislation. The atrocities, no one should deny them. We need to remember the victims and remember our past in order to move forward. Every state around the world has to honor the victims of the Holocaust and clearly condemn Holocaust denial and distortion. We also suggest in our strategy to develop educational programs. Maybe we'll come to this later, but we need to prevent this and other genocides from ever happening again. So we will continue to work specifically with regards to Holocaust denial, call it out, also with our partner countries, and in the multilateral arena. I believe this is very important to ensure that also in the UN, in the OSCE, in the international fora such as the Council of Europe, we actively call out Holocaust denial and distortion, because we must ensure that the truth prevails and protect the facts. So I believe it's really important to be clear about this. And maybe one aspect with regards to what we have done in the European strategy that was adopted last year is to establish a clear external arm of the European Commission's work against anti-Semitism, and calling out Holocaust denial, if it is so blatant as this, is one of the important aspects of that.
Yeah, thank you for that response. I mean, I think this audience is one of the first to hear it directly from you after these events occurred. Just to continue a little bit on the work that you have been doing with regard to the EU strategy that you already mentioned. The strategy was presented in 2021 after a lot of hard work. You were able to present this first ever EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life. It was a major step forward and an unprecedented statement of commitment by the European Commission, with anti-Semitism worryingly on the rise in Europe and beyond. The strategy sets out a series of measures articulated around 3 pillars: to prevent all forms of anti-Semitism, to protect and foster Jewish life, and to promote research, education, and Holocaust remembrance. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your specific role in this process, the background of the strategy for those who were not with us last time you addressed this topic, and how the implementation is proceeding?
Yes, for us, indeed, as a European Commission, as European Union, it was very important, and in particular also for President von der Leyen, to address Europe's responsibility with regards to the Jewish people in the face of rising anti-Semitism, but also with regards to fostering Jewish life, to support Jewish life across the continent, and to acknowledge the challenges they face. I believe we're the first region to have such a comprehensive strategy that really works across the board. And one of my roles in negotiating it was to make sure that all relevant departments of the European Union, of the European Commission, also the External Action Service, contribute to it. It is really a joint effort. In total, we have almost 100 individual actions that are supposed to be implemented by 2030. And now we have, with the help also of the colleagues across the European structures and European institutions, already put 55 of them in motion. You know, we have a long way to go, but it is important that we see the commitment across the European institutions and the European Union to doing so, because that is maybe something that was the first and most important aspect of this strategy, is to make all the different actors aware, the European Parliament, the Commission, but also in particular the member states of the European Union, to ensure that they act in their specific capacities. And so we are very pleased that the states agreed by the end of this year to have national strategies against anti-Semitism, because we are aware that we can do, of course, many initiatives on European level, and they're very important. We have also a coordinating role. But if we really want to change the situation for Jews locally on the ground, we need national, regional, local action. And so to see that all the member states in March of this year agreed to have these strategies is very encouraging. And now what we have done is to make sure we bring them all together we make sure they talk with their Jewish communities. We have regular meetings here in Brussels to ensure that these national strategies actually also cover all the relevant areas. So security, education, Holocaust remembrance, Holocaust education, but also, for example, research on anti-Semitism and on Jewish life, because we have a lot of research on Holocaust here in Europe, but we have a lot less when it comes to anti-Semitism, and we often look actually to the US when it comes to these aspects. And the heart, as I said before, is really support for Jewish life, to ensure that Jews can live their lives in accordance with their religious and cultural traditions.
And to make a link to something that is, I think, on the top of minds of many of us in Europe, but also in the United States. One of the major events of the past year, of course, has been the breakout of the war in Ukraine. There have been many reports about how this war has also affected Jewish communities in Ukraine, the broader region, but also Russia. On a recent delegation to Israel with members of the European Parliament, we visited one of the Israeli reception centers for Ukrainian Jews, for example. Reports are also telling us that at the same time, as mentioned, Russia is facing mass migration abroad of large numbers of its Jewish population, with at least 1 in 8 leaving the country since the war with Ukraine began. Now, of course, this is maybe not the core of your focus since it is outside of the EU, but can you share with us a bit how in your work and what you see happening in also in the European Union and at its borders, the war in Ukraine has impacted, and what is your view of the current situation?
Well, I think there are several dimensions to this. First of all, we were very worried from the beginning of the impact this war has on the Jewish community in Ukraine, but as you say, also in Russia. In fact, we know that some representatives of the Russian Jewish community have been put under pressure to support the aggression by Russia. And as we know, also the chief rabbi of Moscow has left Russia because he was supposed to do so. So I believe it's very important, and Israel plays an important role there also in receiving a large portion of the Russian Jews. We have seen a lot of action from the European side, in particular also with Ukrainian Jewish refugees. In fact, really from day one, we were in touch as European Union with the Federation of Jewish Communities in Ukraine to help conduct the evacuation of Jews from the most affected areas. And interestingly, we could rely there also on an extensive network of faith-based organizations that helped with approximately 1,500 volunteers, including from Jewish organizations, also here from Brussels, in fact, to evacuate 4,000 members of the Jewish community in the first weeks of the war. And I was asked then very early on by Hayes to coordinate the actions a bit on Brussels level, because we have quite a few international organizations, the Jewish organizations, umbrella organizations, that all very quickly got involved in supporting refugees, also in the countries that border Ukraine. And Hayes asked whether we could, have a meeting in Brussels to actually coordinate all these efforts, and we've had 2 such meetings. And I believe, this is also one of our role, although it's a bit beyond our mandate, but to make sure that when there is this kind of need among the Jewish community, to be very practical and simply do it. And I was very impressed, and I am still, with how Jewish communities here have welcomed not only Jewish refugees, but also others. In particular, for example, in Vienna, in a very small Jewish community of 8,000 people, they have received 1,000 refugees that have been living there now for the past 6-7 months, and are being fully supported by the community. So this has been very impressive, and I think it has also brought the Jewish community closer together. And there's also another aspect of the war, the aggression by Russia on Ukraine, and that is, of course, the weaponizing of the Holocaust in the propaganda that came out of Russia. It was not, I think, by coincidence that one of the first bombs fell close to a Holocaust memorial, that 2 Holocaust memorials have been shelled, and that actually we could, with our intelligence ahead of the war, see a significant increase of the war Nazi coming out of Kremlin sources online. Then, of course, we all heard the words from Foreign Minister Lavrov claiming that Adolf Hitler had Jewish blood, and that in the end the Jews were responsible themselves for the Holocaust, fully unacceptable statements. And I believe that, you know, the fact that this was used and this distortion of history is trying to influence not only the Russian population really, but also trying to spill over into Europe and find some resonance there is very dangerous. And we are working on many levels to try to counter this, in particular, of course, online. So there are many aspects to this, and then of course the concrete action, let's say from the European Union, you know, 140 billion euro that have gone into Ukraine as support, but also the most recent statement by President von der Leyen to support the rebuilding of schools in Ukraine with 100 million euros. So there are also these very concrete aspects that are a bit beyond my work. Yeah.
And just to pick up on the reference to the narrative, a narrative that is communicated by the Kremlin, a narrative that we know all too well. If we look towards Europe, due to the war in Ukraine, energy prices are soaring. They are at an extreme high, and this combined with unprecedented inflation records spinning out of control in the Eurozone up to 10%. Many people are facing a tough and dark winter, not being able to pay their energy bills or provide food for their families. In some cases, it really is coming to that already at this moment. With these big problems also following migration to the EU and failed integration programs, populist, right-wing, and sometimes even extreme right parties are on the rise. We've seen recent outcome of the elections in Sweden, and many are uncertain what the upcoming elections in Italy will bring. With the hard right brothers of Italy, they are right now in the polls at an all-time high. Something that no one would really ever expect to happen. But yet it is happening, and we're seeing these developments. So how do you see these political developments in Europe with regard to Jewish communities? Does the right-wing populist wind that blows through Europe affect the EU's relationship with its Jewish population? Do you see worrying developments that should be addressed? And yeah, what is the European Commission doing about it, or can they do anything about it?
Again, I think there are two aspects. One is what is happening has started, let's say, online with conspiracy myths, with blaming also the Jewish communities for what is happening. And unfortunately, we know from history that whenever, the combination of a pandemic and a war and an economic downslope in the past has led to conspiracy and to looking for scapegoats, and all too often the Jewish people have been that scapegoat. What we see and what is probably different today, not only probably, what is for sure different today, is that the European Union and its member states clearly are on the side of the Jewish community. So, while we see very worrying rise of right-wing extremists, populists as a reaction to the challenges that people are facing, we also see that democracies are firm and are fighting back, and are very clear about the fact that these economic challenges are a direct fallout from the Russian aggression on Ukraine. And you probably, some of you might have seen the President von der Leyen in the European Parliament earlier last week, when she said that the bills of these high electricity bills that people receive now really should be sent to Putin. Now, this is of course not the solution for the individual, but we are very clear about where this comes from. Yet I believe we have to be also clear that that the protection also, let's say, in terms of words, in terms of being clear with regards to the Jewish community, is very necessary, and definitely there will be clear support from the European Union for the Jewish communities in the various institutions. Nevertheless, I believe we have to be vigilant, and it's a key responsibility of all of us in such troubling times to speak up and to support actively those forces that can counter extremism.
Just as a general follow-up question on this more specific introduction, what are the biggest challenges that you are facing right now in the work that you are doing?
Well, I truly think that looking at the large scale, in the end, the question is, will we get the internet under control? If we cannot contain the hatred that is spreading in enormous speed on the internet, I believe a democracy is endangered, because as we saw in the past, often spurs of populism came also with new forms of communication. Yeah, for example, Hitler used the radio at the time. Now we have the internet, and that gives populists and extremists suddenly a whole different arena to spread their lies and their threats. And so what we have done as European Union, we have proposed a Digital Services Act, which is supposed to give rules for Europe to the internet, where we want to regulate and have more transparency about algorithms, about content, about reactions from the platforms to illegal content, illegal according to European legislation, because we have hate speech legislation that that has as a result that whatever is illegal offline is also illegal online, and therefore needs to be prosecuted. And to make sure that there are better redress mechanisms, for example, also for users, and we are clear about how platforms can be held to accountability. And this, I believe, once ratified by the European Parliament and the Council, once implemented, will lead to clearer rules and hopefully also an environment in the internet which has become really the public square where we all want to be. Because that's, I think, in a way absurd that we have come to a situation where we accept the fact that left and right of our tweets and of our social media posts, there's always a bit of hatred around. And we want to come to a situation where, again, the internet is an environment where we want to be. And so if we can get that under control, it will have a positive effect on the spread of conspiracy myths, of positive narratives, of correct facts about history, and will I believe this is the standard we should aim for, to use this tool as a positive tool again.
Thank you for this very clear answer. Before moving to my last question for now, because I really want to give the audience the opportunity to participate in this conversation. We have a very, very large audience here today with us. So that's I think very good sign of the large interest there is for the story you have to tell. So I will keep it short. I just wanted to make one remark regarding questions that people can ask. For those of you who have not been with us yet, you can post your questions at the ELNET Q&A in the chat of this Zoom call, and then we will get back to you to give you the floor to ask the question. And when you do, please do not forget to unmute yourself. So with that having said, going back to you, Katharina, I know that you've been recently visiting the Zionist Congress in Basel, and well, I know that you would like to share that story with us because it made a big impact, and I think you were also one of the keynote speakers there. Yeah, maybe you can share with us some about that very impressive event.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. No, I just thought I wanted to share this with you because it was very encouraging. There were about 1,400 representatives, many from the US and Israel, but also from Europe. And to mark 175th anniversary of the first Congress in Basel that Theodor Herzl organized. And what I felt at that event was really the normalcy with which the current issues about Jewish life, about Israel, about the relationship between Jews in the diaspora and Israel were discussed. And I believe this is where we want to come to, that it is a normal situation for Jews to be able to express their thoughts about these issues without having in the back of their mind whether there will be repercussions, whether they really want to share with their colleagues about these issues, because afterwards it might have a negative impact on their career. And this is something that we have been very worried about, that Jews, at least in Europe, in a limited way disclose their Jewish identity in certain environments, including at their workplace. And so to see this was very encouraging. And I mean, we know, of course, that the reason why Herzl came to the conviction that the Jewish people needs their own homeland was out of the direct experience he had in Paris of the Dreyfus affair and the anti-Semitism that was displayed in it. But Europe, in that way, became the cradle of Zionism. We sometimes forget this, but at the time when Herzl suggested homeland for the Jews somewhere else in the world, actually 90% of the Jews were living in Europe. Today it's 9%. And so to see that again, this Congress was possible in that way, and the encouragement I believe that it gives to European Jews, to the diaspora in relationship with Israel, is something to be further developed and very encouraging to see. And I had the chance to present there the EU strategy, and really again this aspect of how we want to make sure that Jewish life in Europe can prosper, and to be very clear also about the last sentence in the strategy, which says Europe can only prosper if its Jewish communities prosper too. And this is the link we make and we want to make, and this is the aim that we have. If we want to make sure that Europe flourishes, we need to make sure that also the Jewish community can live freely and in the way they want to live here in Europe.